Cash flow is king. I've written about that just recently right here at blog.bqe.com. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about cash flow. We're going to get into specifics. We're going to get into things you can actually do with that information. I think it's pretty well known by now. Anybody who's run a business for more than 5 minutes can probably attest to this, that you can be running at a loss and still stay in business if you have cash flow. But if the opposite is true, if you're profitable but don't have cash flow, you'll still go out of business. How could that happen? One simple example is I'm not collecting my receivables, right? So cash flow is really important. It's important, and what you'll find, as I mentioned in the write-up, is that if you take a sampling of business owners and start asking them who's paying a lot of attention to cash flow these days, you'll know exactly who's in trouble, because those are the hands that go up. That's typically when people get real focused on cash flow, right? When money runs short, when things are tight. It's the wrong time to do it. It's too late. The time to do it is before you get into trouble so that you can plan accordingly and not get into trouble. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're in trouble, then of course you need to do it. I'm not saying you should stop. I'm saying let's do it ahead of time if we can. Let's get ahead of that and let's do some planning. In other words, we should be spending most of our time when we run our businesses, or out of the time that we spend on reports, most of it should be spent looking at cash flows. And then in the next article and video, we're going to look at forecasts. And we'll talk a little bit about the difference between cash flow and a forecast. Anyway, something else for another day. Cash flow, we're going to look at cash flow reports in BillQuick Online. We're going to look at the cash flow versus revenue report. We're going to look at the graph monthly billing versus cash flow. That's a really, really easy to read report that gives you really important information. We'll look at monthly cash flow, which is simply your payments by month, so you can see how much money you're taking in each month. And of course, we're going to look at the statement of cash flows. Ask a group of business owners how many of them, or when was the last time they looked at that? And most of them will give you blank stares. Most people don't. Most business owners don't understand the statement of cash flows. And when you first look at one, if you don't have somebody who understands it there to explain it to you, it can be a little confusing and overwhelming. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So as I often say, it's important for the business owner and the accountant to go through these reports together so that you can get the whole entire picture. Let's take a look at BillQuick Online. Let's run these 4 reports and see what they look like. And then I'll leave it to you to post your comments and questions below so we can discuss these reports and make sure that we're all understanding what we're seeing. So one trick to reports in BillQuick Online is first click over to reports, of course. Then, when the page loads, you're going to see on the left, there's a list. BillQuick has, or BQE I should say, has taken the time to put a lot of reports into here for you so that you don't have to spend time customizing reports. Pretty much anything you need has already been thought of and configured here. But of course, if you ever do find that there's a report that you'd like that isn't in here, reach out to my friends at BillQuick, because they will either tell you where that report is. There's a good chance it may be in here and you just missed it. If not, you can get them to help you customize any reports that you need, anything specific. But the trick is use the search. I always look past the search. I always forget that this is here. And I find myself browsing through all these categories. And these are great. But if you have an idea of what you're looking for, you'll find that using the search cuts down on time. So let's use a wildcard, which is a star, and start typing cash flow, right? And you'll see my 4 reports. So let's look at cash flow versus revenue. And if you've spent any time with BillQuick Online's reports, then you're familiar with this screen. You can go in here and you can establish filters to sort of chisel the information down. But if you're not sure, just click View. Just go straight to viewing the report, and then you can always go back and change any of those settings if you want to. So I'm going to pick a date range. This is a sample data company, or sample company, sample data, something like that. I'm going to go back to January 1st, 2016, because I believe that's kind of when all the information that there is to look at is in this company. Perhaps not. Let me try this year. The date to compare with the previous year. So let's just do today, May 23rd, 2017. See what we get. There it is. Now, again, I don't want to spend an hour making a video on this, but I want you to take the time. Don't just look at this report and say, oh, that looks pretty. Take the time to understand what it's telling you, right? Your income was $99,500. Your revenue was $50,000, right? revenue to cash, 51%. So look at these numbers, analyze them, make sure that you understand them. As I explained in the write-up, what you really ought to do is look at these numbers and then turn them into a narrative. Explain them to yourself, or that's also another reason why I think it's good and important even for the accountant business owner to look at this together, because the business owner has the operational insights, the accountant has the financial insights, and together you can come up with the narrative that explains what these numbers say, and based on that you can decide if it makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, it may be a matter of having to dig in. Maybe there are bookkeeping errors, or maybe there's something you're seeing here that you wouldn't have expected that will help clue you into a problem that you can resolve before it becomes a bigger problem, right? Next, we'll look at the graph, monthly billing versus cash flow. I think this may be my favorite of these 4 reports. Let's click on View. And the reason it's my favorite, of course, is because it's visual. Now, the blue is the billing, the red is the cash flow. And that's really why I love this report, because I can look at this. I look at a month like March of 2016. Let me see if I can enlarge this a bit. And look, I have all this billing, but almost no cash flow, right? So then if I did a bunch of billing this month, I would expect the cash flow to come in. And it looks like maybe it happened in June or maybe in August. If I'm right, what this tells me is it's taking an awful long time to collect, right? In fact, notice there's no cash flow in April or May. So it looks like people are taking at least 2 months to pay us, because prior to that, the last billing was done in January, right? And here, this cash flow, I'm going to say, probably was from prior month's billing. So when you analyze this, one of the things I take away from this picture is that we may have a problem with our collections, our turnover on our accounts receivable, something to look at and dig in deeper on and see if maybe we should be a little more aggressive about sending our clients letters when they go past due. Let's go to the next one. You have to type it right. If you start typing something and there are no matching results, it kind of goes blank. The monthly cash flow statements is the easiest report to understand, but it's the simplest. It sort of tells you the least. As you're going to see, it's just going to be a list of each month and how much money you took in. And don't minimize this. This is important to look at. If it were me, I'd probably want to get this into a spreadsheet and transpose it so I have it along a timeline, just so I can see what my monthly cash inflows were each month. And then I might run another report looking at cash outflows. And so you can start to really analyze this kind of stuff and make use of it. Let's go to the last one, cash flow. And that's the actual statement of cash flows. Now, this gets us into that question that I always get asked, where somebody says, Seth, I made $750,000, but I only have $300,000 in the bank. What happened? And just very quickly, and without going into a whole video on the statement of cash flows, I can look at this and say, well, yeah, you made $766,000, but look at your accounts receivable line. Now, what this is telling me is that receivables went up, which means of this $766,000, almost $400,000 of it has not been collected, right? We have uncollected accounts receivable. So we subtract that from net income to arrive at cash. And that's the other reason I love the statement of cash flows as a report, is it does exactly that. It answers that question specifically. It reconciles my net income to cash. Now, what's going on in between here are not the balances in the accounts on the balance sheet, but the changes in the balances in the accounts on the balance sheet. That's why this statement gets a little tricky to look at and understand, which is why I especially stress here, more so than anywhere else, that if you're a business owner looking at this, get together with your accountant, reach out to me. I'll work with you and help you understand this. But it's such an important statement, especially because, like I said at the beginning, cash is king. Cash flow is the most important thing to look at and understand. It's the one thing that can save your business and having cash flow is the one thing that can keep you from going out of business, even if you're not profitable. And a big piece of it, as we've kind of seen here already, is going to have to do with your accounts receivables collection. You got to make sure those receivables are coming in quickly as possible. You want that accounts receivable turnover period to be as short as it can possibly be, and we want to get a little aggressive without crossing the line with our clients when they're a little slow to pay us, because that's good for our cash flow, it's good for us. And think of it this way. This is the way I like to think of this. Now I'm going to get a little philosophical on you. I'm better able to serve my clients when I get them to pay me on time, because I don't want to have to sit there worrying about my cash flow. I'd much rather spend that time and energy worrying about how I can better serve my clients. So go to your clients with that message when you're asking them to see if they can pay you a little more quickly. Say, hey, look, I don't want to spend time, I don't want to make this phone call. I'd much rather be focusing on your plans for your own business and things that I can do to help you grow that business rather than calling you and asking you to speed up the payments. That, my friends, is how you can blow your clients away or yourself with cash flow reports in BillQuick Online.